You know I typically start these videos with some kind of expository explanation, but this film is literally titled Gymkata. There's nothing I need to say about that.
Ho 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 ho! Delightfully devilish, Seymour.
Yes, everybody, welcome back to Delightfully Devilish, the show where we discuss films that all at once meet the criteria of being the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm your host, Jukebox Harry, and today we are looking at what happens when you try to give an acting career to a professional athlete in the weirdest way of doing so. Professional athletes transitioning to the big screen are not often held in particularly high regard. I mean, look at the acting careers of Hulk Hogan and Shaquille O'Neal. They have films like Suburban Commando and Kazam to their name. And in a similar vein, today's movie has an equally ridiculous name, except you probably haven't heard of the star of this movie before. Gymkata is led by Kurt Thomas, an Olympic gymnast who had literally no prior acting experience before he made this movie. Like Brian Bosworth getting cast in Stone Cold, Kurt Thomas did not have to climb the ladder into a starring role. He was just given one because people were so sure he would succeed. And like Stone Cold, Gymkata could not settle for being just a generic film. Gymkata is a movie that had to be so strange and so weird that it attained an unforgettable status. The intro credits of this film play out as we stare at a pole for the longest time. That's not a joke. We literally just stare at the pole as we hear these violins play. Oh, of course, it's a gymnast bar. This turns into shots of Kurt Thomas performing on it in slow motion, intercut with a bunch of random people riding through the woods on horses. Turns out they're chasing some white guy, as are a bunch of ninjas. This guy tries to cross a gorge by a rope and takes an arrow to the gut, plummeting to his death. And Kurt Thomas completes his training and goes off with some government agent. I did not leave any essential clips out of trying to explain what the hell was happening there. That's exactly how it unfolded.
For the next 2 months, you're going to toughen your mind and your body. Those men, among others out there, will train you. Any questions?
None.
I have plenty, but I don't think I'm gonna like the answers.
You recognize him?
Kana Parmistan.
In this film's universe, there is a country called Parmistan. As a Victorian-raised Australian, that offends me. Anyone who has lived in Australia knows there is a great debate ranging between state to state on what a chicken parmigiana is called. Some states call it a parma, some states call it a parmi. I was raised to call it a parma. I have travelled internationally debating with people that it should be called a parma, and the fact that this film calls its country Parmistan means that it has taken a political stance that I will not agree with.
What do you know about his country?
It's a tiny mountain nation in the middle of the Hindu Kush range.
Who's this?
I don't know.
His name's Zamir.
Oh, I guess you didn't need to ask that question then, did you, asshole?
He intends to overthrow the Khan and sell the country to the other side. We're interested in Parmistan for one reason, and that's location. A Star Wars satellite station inside Parmistan could monitor all the other satellites around the world.
Okay, so Parmistan is a small mountain nation, and we are expected to believe that it has an essential satellite station in it?
No.
And could you think of a better name than the Star Wars satellite? How about calling it the Capricorn 1 satellite? For one thing, that seems slightly more believable, and for another thing, then it's referencing a part of pop culture which the market hasn't completely oversaturated.
Anyone who enters Parmistan must play the game.
Star Wars satellite. The game. Wow, the mythology in this film is just brilliant. I can't wait to meet the actual villain of the film. I bet it turns out to be the protagonist's father. They even make a loose reference to his father having a connection to the game, but they don't explain it.
No outsider has won the game in over 900 years.
Yeah, so that sounds pretty fucking dangerous. Couldn't you just get the American military involved, have them go help out a nation that's at threat of being overthrown?
Why don't we send in the troops?
Direct military action is out of style, my friend.
Oh, that's why. Yeah, that's all this film had to say about that idea.
May I present the Princess Rubali of Parmistan.
Hey! Hey, wait!
What she's saying is, don't trust anybody.
I think she was saying, hi, my name is Amber Heard. Also in real life, she was a Playboy model, and Kurt Thomas is a gymnast, so that means that this film was literally willing to cast anyone who was not actually a fucking actor. We see our hero train to walk upstairs with his hands, fight and chop wood while yellow-faced Kirk Douglas and a bird watch him. There's also this. Am I meant to be impressed by that? Like, I feel like I'm meant to be, but I'm not, because I feel like I'm just watching the Star Wars kid. Also, for the record, our hero literally never uses these weapons in the story. This scene is literally just here so this guy can show off. So by this point in the film, you might find yourself asking two questions. What is he training for, and what the fuck actually is the game? This film hypes up some kind of event, but it never actually explains exactly what that event is. But apparently it warrants learning to walk up the stairs with your hands. Still, I wouldn't trust the people training him. This guy here very voluntarily takes the fall in this scene.
Not quick enough.
Yeah, were any of you actually impressed watching that? Like, did this seem threatening to you at all? I felt like I was watching bad actors in a high school play messing around with props.
You know she doesn't talk?
The princess will come around. Interesting background. Her mother was Indonesian.
Is that really interesting though? Because if that's your standard of the word interesting, then I don't think this film is going to meet my standard of that word.
Good morning, princess.
Buongiorno, principessa!
Good morning, Jonathan. You're looking handsome as always.
Did you sleep well?
This is the actual peak of Kurt Thomas's performance in the film. Him desperately trying to incorporate his acrobatics in just for the sake of a joke. I'm so happy he did this, but I definitely do not constitute this as being high art in any form. And then he just kisses her, completely out of the blue, starting a relationship between the two of them all of a sudden. Seriously, how much of this film was actually written? This film was apparently based off a book called The Terrible Game, but they also renamed it to Gymkata, so I don't think they were very faithful. And I can guarantee you that this scene was not in the original book. Our hero gets paired up with some James Bond-esque gadgets.
Fine piece of work.
Out of the blue, she can talk now. She spent the entire start of the film not saying a single word, but somehow managing to start a relationship with our hero. And then out of the blue, she can talk, but no one is surprised by it.
She's just a liar, right?
And a bit of a tramp, if you ask me.
They go to the fictitious town of Caribou, where Americans aren't viewed all that favorably. This just came out of absolutely nowhere, and it sparks our hero to just run off, leading to his first confrontation. Ooh, that was a bad cut right there. We also get this guy very voluntarily falling over. So this is the titular Gymkata, a style of martial arts that was literally invented for the sake of this film, which combines elements of the Olympic floor routine with style of martial arts. It's like some kind of pretentious form of capoeira. The fight scenes in this movie are very unconvincing, but it's so hard to look away from them. Kurt Thomas really puts a lot of effort into this film to try to make it seem like a legitimate form of martial arts. And if nothing else, I gotta respect him for working so hard at it. Our hero finds out that the Princess of Parmistan has been captured by terrorists.
Just be ready for two of us, Colonel.
Just look at that line delivery there. It is genuinely very hard to find any actor who has as little charisma as Kurt Thomas, but that's because he is not an actor. He goes to seek her out and thus starts another chase. As weird as it is to see a skimpy-ass American running around a foreign land in a red jacket with no emotion to it whatsoever, to the credit of Kurt Thomas, I have never seen an action movie where a hero can do this. Honestly, the concept of combining gymnastics with martial arts is clearly not the worst idea, but to put it in such a ridiculously outlandish story is just completely out of whack. Our hero breaks into their house where the princess is being kept and starts kicking ass again, or at least jumping all over the place and having his enemies react as if he's actually kicking ass. The boss man starts shooting blindly at the door, which somehow causes his own men to stumble through the door towards him before copping it. As much as all these fight scenes are oddly entertaining to look at, there is no feeling of excitement whatsoever. It's worth noting that the director of this movie, Robert Klaus, he's the creator of some very iconic martial arts exploitation movies, including Jackie Chan's The Big Brawl and more famously, Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon. So he can be considered one of the pioneers of martial arts exploitation cinema in the Western world, and all the signs are here. The bad ones, not the good ones. Martial arts movies are recognized for their simplistic or sometimes absurd plots, poor ADR, and the reliance on fight scenes to carry the entire movie, and Gymkata is no exception to any of this. Unfortunately, Gymkata has all of these and so many other questionably bad decisions, including way too many shots of characters just running places without any actual technique applied to the filmmaking to convey to audiences any feeling of what is actually going on. This scene in particular has a seemingly endless supply of them, which is bad, but just in the boring kind of way. I would actually recommend just hitting fast forward when watching this scene because this is possibly the most boring chase on foot I've ever seen in a movie, and it finally concludes after 3 of the longest minutes you have ever had to sit through in your life. Once they get back, the Robert Ludlum character of the story shoots a bunch of people, and then we cut to the next day with our heroes suddenly rafting down some river rapids, which culminates in more shots of characters just moving from point A to point B. Yeah, just because they happen to be riding down the river, this doesn't mean it's entertaining. But the creators of Gymkata couldn't figure that out because again, there is exactly 3 minutes of this. Seriously, I would like to see the characters from this movie get from point A to point B in less than 3 minutes.
Get there faster!
That is the only innovation I want to see in this movie, and it still might be too much of an expectation. After finally getting back onto land, we encounter some riverside ninjas, which sparks our boy to start fighting again, and it's just more gymnastic absurdity. Kurt Thomas may have some impressive physical movements to him, but it's the actual fight scenes where he fails to make a convincing impression in this film. And he actually loses this fight, getting knocked out and waking up in an entirely different setting.
What's going on?
You'll get no answer.
Well, with this film's standard of storytelling, I'm not surprised about that.
Who are you?
I'm Rick James, bitch! Commander Zamir, advisor to the Khan. Khan! 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 Khan!
Richard Norton, you Australian son of a bitch. Yeah, by the way, he's not an actor either. He's a professional stuntman and bodyguard, and the fight choreographer on this film. Actor? No.
The Khan will be presiding over an explanation of the game. Afterwards, a banquet. The next day, you will play.
That's what I'm here for.
If there is anything I can do for you, please ask.
Yeah, you could replace yourself with someone who doesn't actually have less charisma than Kurt Thomas and the face of Pauly Shore. Seriously, just look at the guy. We finally get the rules of the game explained to us.
The fourth part is to enter the river that will lead you, dead or alive, to the high forest.
Yeah, dead or alive? If you're dead, you can't actually be led anywhere. Come on, this is an entry-level writing mistake, guys.
I must go play king for my people.
Okay, so he's meant to be the king. Did anyone see this coming? Are we actually meant to believe that this guy's king? I don't know. Then the game begins, which means more shots of everybody moving places. We get villagers on foot, competitors on horses, ninjas in a cornfield, and people climbing ropes for a slightly shorter running time of 2 minutes 40. Alright, so this film has actually achieved something.
Why'd you do that?
That warrior broke the rules. The prisoners were in the next stage of the game.
I heard some of those words, but a lot of them were being drowned out by the music, so I guess we can add bad sound editing to the list of mistakes in this film. More running! You know, I know I could have used this joke earlier, but it felt way too on the nose then, but I've got to get it out of the way now, so here we go.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
We get back to the point from the start of the film, the gorge. A random guy tries to cross but gets shot with an arrow. So everyone just gives up and rides away. Is that it? Have you guys just given up on this game, or are you trying to find a way around it? Well, apparently everyone just throws a massive party for them. What are you celebrating? Them giving up on their adventure halfway through? Fuck it, I'm out. I've got to stop questioning all the stupid elements of this story. It's gonna kill me if I do.
My father, Colonel Cabot. He came here to play the game. What happened to him?
Your father was a superb competitor.
Oh, so his dad died in the game. That adds literally nothing to the story. It might add a redemption arc at some point, or some kind of twist where he's still alive. I don't know. We just have to wait and see. And then the princess is suddenly engaged to Zamir, apparently. This I actually fully believe, because as we learn from the start of the film, the princess is completely willing to throw herself at guys she has never said a word to. Zamir starts flexing his skills with size, but again, the tone of the film refuses to let me be actually impressed by anything with this. Every time a guy starts flexing a weapon in this film, it just feels like I'm watching the Star Wars Kid.
You will take me to the Princess Rivali.
He doesn't even hold his knife in the right spot for the majority of this shot. But of course, with his one-note performance, he was never going to seem like a legitimate threat regardless. Then for some reason, he actually gives her the knife and tells her to have the princess meet up with him, which she does.
The young people, they want our country to join the 20th century.
I want the director of this film to actually join the 20th century, or at the very least the 1980s, because he's still stuck in the 1970s with his style of direction.
It's funny.
No, it isn't.
Do you think they're just gonna allow me to walk out of here?
Well, maybe not walk, but I'm sure you can try running. Apparently everyone in this film is okay with everyone running all the time. Oh look, there you go now! We cut to the next day, and the running starts again, and it goes on for, you guessed it, another 3 straight minutes. I really wish I was making this up. If you ever actually watch this movie, try timing it. Every time there's an extended sequence of characters just moving places, you'll find it's 3 minutes. After those 3 minutes, we have some climbing, which isn't even any more impressive, even though one of the guys gets arrowed in the process. Our hero's rope gets set ablaze, but there's no feeling of threat, and no way he's gonna die, so when he reaches the top, it's an emotionally empty scene. The only one who's actually surprised is Kangaroo Jack here.
They broke the rules. Kill them. Damn it.
I never thought it was actually possible to say damn it with so little charisma, but Kurt Thomas actually did it. And that's still probably the most emotion we're actually gonna get out of him in this film. More running, with the horses somehow catching up to our hero in no time. Then we're back at the gorge, and the competitors all make attempts to actually cross the thing this time. The Asian competitor starts fighting with Budget Bin Thor, who very quickly and unconvincingly manages to choke him to death. Cabot catches up and has a very disastrous emotional reaction of finding someone murdered. And then he tracks down Thor.
Out of the way, Thorg.
Bro, I came up with that nickname first. Come up with your own. Seriously, react slower. Eventually, Cabot reaches the city, and after wandering around the depressive scenery for far too long, an incredibly unconvincing villain approaches and tries to attack him with a sickle, which he dodges. Slowly. Several times. And then the guy cuts off his own hand. I got nothing. Just no words to say to that. A group of random old women start groping him and then hitting him, so he hits back. Then he beats up this old guy. That is not a human noise. The chase continues through a herd of pigs where Thor ends up getting murdered by a bunch of farmers. Then we get the actual peak of the film. Pinned down by a bunch of farmers, Cabot shows off the full extent of his Gymkata using a stone block with 2 handlebars to defeat everyone in his immediate area who all stand around holding deadly weapons but only attack 1 or 2 at a time. The sheer ridiculousness of the film gets to the extreme here as Kurt Thomas really shows off his physicality, and I won't deny that some of his skills really are impressive. But when you think about it, this guy is literally just performing a pommel horse routine and people have been told to walk in and pretend they got hit in the process. They call it a fight scene. Although you might be enjoying this scene, unfortunately all good things come to an end.
Jump! Deacon! Jump!
Then it transitions into him running again, but this time it's all in slow motion, so it manages to go on for even longer. Cabot trying to get away from everyone goes on for 3.5 minutes this time, more than making up for the 2-minute and 40-second chase scene from earlier, and literally all the shots are in slow motion. Every single one. Move over Matrix, move over Baywatch, even move over Battlefield Earth. This film has you beat.
Dad. My God.
Yep, his dad was alive. Big surprise. And Kurt Thomas could not be any less emotional about the situation.
I don't know what's real anymore.
Oh, let me help you with that. Your career as a gymnast is real. Your career as an actor is definitely not. And immediately after being reunited with his father, the guy is killed. And Cabot starts running again. Jesus Christ, this plot twist is generic enough, but why would you put it in if you were only going to kill the character off anyway? I know by this point I should be expecting nothing but illogical narrative choices, but I'm still surprised. Cabot faces off with Kangaroo Jack in the woods using a stick, while his enemy uses a sword.
No, I don't know what I expected.
Then they go hand to hand in a fight scene where an accomplished martial artist has to convincingly lose in a fight to an Olympic gymnast. But there's hardly any effort put into the experience all the way until the neck break. And then for no apparent reason, the king finally believes his daughter, who has spent the entire film trying to convince him that he is under threat by Zamir. And this starts the resistance against the insurgents. Oh, and it turns out that Papa Cabot survived. I had to do some research to learn that was apparently supposed to be him at the start of the film. The film just didn't make this clear to me. And then the movie literally just ends with some title text, where the writers have also visibly made the mistake of putting an extra spacebar between the words wars and defense. Then the credits roll. With all the bad movies that I've talked about on this show, you'd think my standards have sunk so low that I couldn't possibly be surprised anymore. Gymkata actually managed to lower the bar even further down. This movie made mistakes I have never seen from any other film in my life. Is Gymkata a bad film? Yes, this is one of the dumbest martial arts films I have ever seen. I could not honestly believe that a martial arts film could literally be this ridiculous, but it was. And goddamn it, that is some kind of achievement. In discussing Gymkata, let me once again compare this film to Stone Cold. Stone Cold was the first film for a sports star, in this case Brian Bosworth. Both him and Kurt Thomas got the lead in films which made them into action stars. Both earned them Golden Raspberry Award nominations for Worst New Star, deservedly, and both films have a very special kind of stupidity with them. Neither films are interested in being generic and forgettable action movies. These are bad films which insist on being so outlandish, strange, and unintentionally hilarious that they both earn the status of being completely unforgettable. Of the two movies, I definitely have to say I prefer Stone Cold. It was so much funnier, it was so much more ridiculous, and it actually had some actors in it. But Gymkata followed the same kind of illogical direction in a completely different way. The director of this film really knows how to make his movie follow the formula of a 1970s martial arts movie. The problem is that by 1985, that formula feels very much outdated. By the time this film was made, Jackie Chan was breaking new ground around the martial arts film market by pioneering a comedic style of martial arts storytelling. Gymkata is similarly comedic, but it's never intending to be. It takes itself very immensely seriously, with its head so far up its own ass that it actually thinks there's a valiant mystery in the story. Its premise is just so ridiculous. It's some kind of blend between Mortal Kombat and The Most Dangerous Game. Now that might sound amazing in theory. In theory, communism works. In theory. In reality, the director was just way past his prime, and that's not me saying that, I'm quoting Kurt Thomas. In the same interview where he said that, Kurt Thomas also mentions that Gymkata was a very low budget film and there was very few takes done more than once, so that actually explains a lot of the mediocrity that gets left in the movie. Objectively speaking, Gymkata has none of the right pieces to fit together whatsoever. It's a film with such an off-the-wall premise which follows such a strict formulaic path. It doesn't feature any real actors or any real martial arts whatsoever. The titular Gymkata never even actually gets called that in the film. And even though the campy fight scenes are the best part of the film, the majority of the movie is just shots of characters moving across the Yugoslavian landscape. And even though Cabot spends the entire film traveling across the landscape, the one way he never moves across it is on his hands. So all those scenes of him training to walk on his hands, They were all for nothing. And yet it makes complete sense that that never comes back. Because it doesn't make sense. Nothing makes any sense in this movie, and that's the entire point. One thing that does impress me about Gymkata is just how little characterization it puts into anyone in this film, because I don't know if they're trying to put characterization in or not. I'm sure that if they actually tried, the film would have just dragged on, so it's actually pretty good they didn't bother. Still, there are moments where the film could have at least tried. For instance, before any of the representatives from different countries start competing in the games, we could have scenes depicting them interacting with each other and giving us some background.
But that's not the way it happened.
Gymkata has a lot of elements of being a good bad movie, but since the majority of the movie is just boring shots of people running, it ends up being wasteful. It's like making a cocktail out of 8 different spirits that should never go together, and then cutting it to still be 95% water. It's not going to get you drunk, it's just going to taste awful. And unfortunately, that's my real gripe with this film. There are so many inspired moments of bad filmmaking in this film, like Cabot having that conversation with himself, and all the scenes with the actual Gymkata in it, but so much of this film is just characters running, with the camera literally just plonked there to capture it. There's no atmosphere, there's no feeling. You know, the music in this film tries to give it some at some points, but no, it's just so soulless. Gymkata gets 3 backflip conversations out of 10. It has a completely absurd premise, a lot of terrible story decisions, and nobody with any acting experience. There are some moments of unintentional hilarity that come with the style of martial arts that was invented for this film, but they're overshadowed by a bunch of shots of people running, or climbing, or riding horses, or moving across the landscape in some different way that this film confuses for having any kind of an actual story. And on that note, we are finished for today's episode of Delightfully Devilish. You guys, if you would like to see more episodes of this show, please hit that subscribe button up top. If you have movies you want me to talk about on this show, please leave them in the comment section below. Otherwise, until next time, I have been your host, Jukebox Harry. Peace.